And welcome to the Halloween edition of Fun Ideas Podcast. And with us today, we have Charles F. Rosenay, exclamation point, exclamation point, exclamation point. And he's going to talk to us today about his top 10 horror lists from various celebrities around the world. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. I was going to do one of my voices. I was going to do either Bela Lugosi or Boris Karloff.
Go ahead.
And I figured it's a visual. It doesn't do the same. When I do like radio interviews and I go, "Oh, so nice to be on your show," or Peter Lorre, "I'm so happy to finally be here." It has more of an impact than when you see this same face making those sounds. It doesn't really have the same.
I don't know. I had Keith Scott on here as the voice of Bullwinkle, and when he was doing it, it's just a kick. Just watch him go, hey, because he's the guy doing it, and it's like, wow.
So, Mark, are you a monster kid too? When I say the name Peter Lorre, do you instantly know who that is?
Who? No, I'm just kidding. Yeah, he was in that Jerry Lewis movie, The Patsy, right? Anyway.
He was also in Mad Love and Am. And
No, I do know who Peter Lorre is. Yes. You want my take on horror movies first, and then we'll go with you?
Sure, let's get that out of the way. Yeah.
So I will admit, as a kid, I don't want to say I was a chicken shit, but yeah, close to it. So anything a little extreme, I tended to avoid, and my parents didn't have to tell me, "Oh, don't watch that movie" or something. Monster movies just kind of freaked me out when I was a little kid. We're talking like age 3 to 6 or something like that, maybe to 8 or something like that. I knew, and then we're talking early 70s here, and I knew about magazines like Famous Monsters, and I'd go to the newsstand and I'd flip through it and I'd get freaked out and I'd have to put it back. So I didn't buy it for the longest time. I just looked at it. And the first issue I ever bought, I was like 10 in like 1977. So that's how, but movies that came out during that I was aware of that were big, it was like The Exorcist in 1973. As a little kid, when that came out, you couldn't have paid me to go see that film. Now I've seen it many times. It's like, I can't say it's boring, but it's certainly not as explicit as my 6-year-old mind was making up in my head.
So society's changed that too, because as horror films have, gotten gorier or scarier or more, contemporary, the scares of our childhood won't be the same. It was so impactful at the time that people, first of all, the lines for theaters were around the block when it came out, and people were fainting, people were throwing it, people were, having incredible reactions to this film, which they hadn't had probably since the 1930s and 40s when the original Frankensteins and Draculas and all those movies shocked them. And you look back on those, and those are tame and I don't say lame, but they're certainly not as impactful as the word. But it's funny you mentioned The Exorcist, because that comes up a lot in my book. It does.
Yes, it does. And I have read through it because Willy gave me an advance preview so I can read through and ask you a few things, which I've written down here. Going back to my story, just to kind of where I started to fall into horror. The next big horror movie, which is kind of arguable, but a few people had on their list, was Jaws. And again, couldn't pay me to go see it when it first came out. I did see it when they reissued it in 79 with Jaws 2 as a double feature. And there is a couple scares in there at that age that, like the head when it goes in front of the boat or out of the hole of the boat. Oh my God, I jumped out of my seat when I first saw that as a kid.
That's on the same level as the jump scare in Alien, the first Alien. Those are the same level of wow. Yeah.
Now, the next movie, the one you just said, Alien, by that age, which I came out in 79, I was about 11, 12 years old. I thought that was pretty cool. There were some scares, granted, but by that point, I could see those things, So that's when I started immersing myself. I was buying Famous Monsters, I was buying Fangoria, I was buying all the different magazines that came out. I still have most of them, and it was still in the days before home video, so I was going, damn it, I wish I could see this movie. or you'd see it if they showed it, like say Boris Karloff, Frankenstein, but it was chopped up or with tons of commercials, and it's like it was a grainy print that was all shaky and scratchy, and you're like, but it was something. So you just kind of glommed onto it. Kids today, they're all, oh, they didn't remaster it right. I'm not going to buy this Blu-ray. And it's like, you don't know what it was like. It's like you had to just catch it when it happened to be on, and whatever quality they showed it at. You know. So
Yeah.
after that, oh, I'm sorry, I finished my story. After that, I fully became immersed. I would see like everything. So I've seen all the Universal ones. I've seen all the Hammer ones, Amicus. Seen all Friday 13th. Really recent stuff I haven't been paying attention to as much, but I mean, I've seen like the Saw movies and Hostel and a few things like that. But there's so many made today, it's hard to keep up. So I just pick and choose and see a few things, but it's not my prime genre, so I don't actively seek it out. But if I see it, I'm fine with it. So.
It's funny because I in the book I detail how I've, my origins of loving monster movies. But I also say, and you mentioned that there's so many come out. I also say in my book, admittedly, 9 out of 10 horror movies are not good, but it's worth watching them to get to that 10th. And I was doing a library appearance the other day, and a few friends of mine were in the audience who I knew were Mets fans, and I grew up being a Mets fan as well, and I still am. And I equated it to, the Mets would lose 9 out of 10 games, but it was worth it to wait for that one game that they actually won, which balanced out the others. The first movie that I remember seeing was Bride of Frankenstein. And I always say, my first memory in life is seeing the Beatles on Ed Sullivan. And, it's debatable because this might have been before it. And I didn't remember it until I was writing the book. And I really, pressed myself to remember what was the first movie I saw. And it's very distinctive as to why I remember it, is because my mom had been wanting me to see horror movies for a while. And in those days, they were called monster movies. The word horror didn't exist. And in those days, like you say, you can't just press the Netflix button and watch whatever you want. You couldn't go to Redbox. There was no streaming. There was no HBO. There was no on demand. None of that. So you had to see what was on, when it was on, whether it was the Munsters or the Monkeys, Addams Family. If you missed it, your only prayer for a sitcom was to see it in rerun.
Right. Next summer.
And your only prayer for seeing a movie was having something which was the Bible for television, and that was called TV Guide. And unless you scanned that TV Guide and you looked at every column and every channel, and there weren't a lot of channels. I grew up in New York. We had the 3 networks and then 3 local channels, channel 5, 9, and 11. So we only had 6 channels to pick from, and only the few of them came in good. The others, you had to hold the antennas up in a certain way with you, and if you moved, forget it, you'd lose it. It would become static. So my mom says, hey, you're finally going to get a chance to see not the movie I want you to see, which was Frankenstein, but the second closest thing to it, which was Bride of Frankenstein. And I said, all right, I guess. Blah, blah, blah. I remember it started and I went right to bed. I wanted to go to bed early. And I never wanted to go to bed early. I was a midnight kid like my kids are. I went to bed. I couldn't sleep. I just heard the first sounds, the opening, whatever. I said, I'm not, no way. Next day, this was a holiday. We had off the whole week. And $1 Million Movie would show the same movie at 7:30, and it would show on Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. It would show the same movie the whole week.
Yeah, I've heard that.
So if it was Gone with the Wind, if it was whatever the movie was, it would show the entire week. So Bride of Frankenstein was on again the next night, and I'm like, what is this torture? How dare it be on another night? But my mom was a little tricky. She made the Jiffy Pop popcorn. She made warm milk. She put blankets on the 2 of us. My dad had gone to sleep and said, you know what? We're watching it. And I sat there and I had the blanket over my head. I listened to it barely. Third night, I knew she was going to put me through it. And I kind of watched it like this. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Kind of looked at it and I didn't want to watch it, but I kind of liked it. Thursday night, I watched it and loved it.
Wow.
And Friday morning, when I got up, I said, Mom, is it on again? When is it on? I couldn't wait the whole day to see it again. After that night, we scanned the TV guide to see when whether Dracula or Wolfman or Phantom or any movie. And I got hooked on a TV show called Chiller Theater
Oh yeah.
and Creature Features. And those would show like these really bad horror movies or science fiction films from the 50s and 60s.
Mhm.
But I couldn't get enough. To me, there was no such thing as the colossal beast was as good as everything was great.
Yeah.
And I, those were my three passions growing up was baseball, Beatles, and monster movies. And I was a horror kid. I would get every monster model you could. In those days, it was the Aurora
Right.
models.
Right.
And I made them all and I loved them. I got, like you said, all the famous monsters of filmland. Here's a latter day version of one of those models that was remade years later.
Right.
But of course, that famous The Bride of Frankenstein, which was the first one I'd remember seeing. And I just couldn't get enough of it, never knowing that fast forwarding years ahead, I'd be hosting Dracula tours to Transylvania, producing paranormal conventions. For my horror things, I'd be, building and operating and running and eventually selling a haunted house. I mean, my God, my own haunted attraction. All these things were amazing. And eventually, of course, putting out this marvelous book called The Book of Top 10 Horror Lists. And on the other hand, from the musical point of view, and I think we can see the Wolfman and Dracula and Yellow Submarine right next to the worlds didn't collide. They were just as important. And with the Beatles, I went on to, as we've talked about on past shows, produce Beatle conventions, publish a magazine on the Beatles, Good Day Sunshine, do the Beatle tours to Liverpool, still do the festivals. And, and there's a Beatles book in the pipeline for me. So the things that I loved, I was able to somehow turn into, I'm not going to say money makers or my profession, because it's certainly not. I'm a DJ. I entertain at weddings and bar mitzvahs and school dances and any occasions. That's my actual vocation. That's my job. That's what I do best, and that's what I get paid well for. Everything else is just an amazing hobby, and I'm so blessed that my passions growing up turned into things that I could not only do and love and maybe in some cases make some money on, but bring other people such happiness and joy. And that's, what a blessing.
It's funny you mentioned, you said Yellow Submarine, and you're saying you kind of try to put it together, but even in Yellow Submarine, there's Frankenstein's monster in Yellow Submarine. There's King Kong in Yellow Submarine. So they had the connection there of monster icons and things like that in that film. So, I mean, it wasn't too far-fetched to, and, even the Beatles themselves, I mean, like in Help, they have kind of like, the two bumbling scientists that's kind of like the old monster scientists and more Frankenstein and stuff like that.
More like a James Bond 007, but I can see that.
Yeah.
And the cover here of the book, we've got Frankenstein, right, and King Kong, and they're one above, one's next to each other, and those are the two that you mentioned that were both in Yellow Submarine.
Right.
And there's one scene in Yellow Submarine, and it's a split second, and I don't know if you see it because it goes by so fast, where just 3 exclamation marks come on the screen for no reason. Did you ever see that?
Where is that?
Well, you'll watch it again in slow motion and you'll eventually see it.
Oh,
so that justified, my 3 exclamation
marks.
Oh,
okay. I never knew that, and I've never asked you about that.
That's not the reason. That's
okay.
I got to show you something which will be this is the defining moment of my justification of everything. Is there's a picture of me, it's in my book.
Yeah.
And it's of me as a kid. And what am I playing? All these great Aurora monster models, right?
Yeah.
I'm in my pajamas. Yeah. And right behind me, what do we see?
The Beatles. Yeah.
I couldn't have created this. I couldn't have made this up. To have found this was like, oh my gosh, I'm the monster kid with the Beatles poster behind me. And that, it all the universes and the stars all aligned in that picture. And it all just, had I known back then, who would have known that
Yeah.
my life would be monsters and Beatles and all this fun, great pop culture stuff.
You know what's weird? I never thought about this till you just said that. I said I started buying Famous Monsters in 1977. That was also the same year I became a Beatles fan. It was 1977. And it's like, wow, I didn't realize that happened at the same time. I was aware of both prior to that, monster
Yeah.
movies and the Beatles, but it wasn't like I was had to have it or was collecting it. They were just around, you know. And I'm sure you even well, I don't know how young were you when that
Well,
Bride of Frankenstein was?
1977 is a very, very important year for me, believe it or not,
Hmm.
because I was still in high school or college. I was just, starting to get entrepreneurial or whatever the word is.
Okay.
And then I attended Beatlemania on Broadway that
Yeah,
year.
I did too.
A girl got me to
Not in
go
Broadway, but
with touring. And in 1977, I think I attended my first Beatles convention as well. And I knew that there were conventions in Boston. Joe
yeah.
Pope had been doing the Magical Mystery Tour conventions. There were conventions in New York, and I was right in the middle. So Boston, New York, I'm in the middle, and I'm in Connecticut thinking, well, wait, these places have them. Why can't Connecticut have them? And this guy who was clueless and still a student, borrowed mommy's money and daddy's money and sold my butcher cover and did whatever I had to put on a little convention. And this rinky dink convention was a joke. I mean, there was so
Let's
few
start
people,
somewhere.
so few people attended. The special guest was the president of the Beatlemania fan club. I mean, come on, and one band and 5 dealers, but somehow the spark of that exploded and continued into other things. But 1977, and I really don't think about that a lot, but that was a very pivotal year for me. And just prior to that, I had a dear friend whose dad had a luxury box in Madison Square Garden before luxury boxes were the norm. And this was a big deal. And he said, any concert you want to go to, I will take you to. He had just moved to Connecticut. We were classmates, and that was his way of getting, in with the cool guy. And I said, all right, well, I understand the Stones are coming. I've never been to Madison Square Garden. I've never seen the Stones. I would love to go to that. We go. Billy Preston opens. This is like, what a show. This is amazing. Mick Jagger's dancing on a phallic set. Everything about it is great. And then a few months later, they announce Wings are coming to Madison Square Garden. And I'm like, Mark Katz, I want to go with you to see Paul McCartney at Madison Square Garden. It's going to be great. He's my all-time favorite. And Mark, who's already ingratiated himself with the school and is no longer needing to be, friends with the cool guy, says, well, you wanted one and you saw the Stones. I'm taking my friend Dory to that.
Oh,
So it was many years later that I saw Paul. But anyway,
no.
why did I digress to that? Oh, because you mentioned that you're,
77.
that you became Beatles and Monsters around 77. And at that point, I was starting my, promotional career around that time.
Hmm. Now,
Uh,
when you saw Bride of Frankenstein, how old were you then?
I
Oh,
think 5.
okay. Now, were you aware of monsters or monster movies prior to that, or no?
I don't know. I mean, we read comic books together, so there were surely monsters in Superman was fighting another alien every week in those comics in those days. So I was aware of them, but not that there was a monster in a movie, a
Yeah.
real life monster. I was still, for me, it was Bozo, the Three Stooges.
So you started in humor too. So that's funny.
Yeah, and what else? Probably the Looney Tunes cartoons,
Yeah.
and then whatever the spin-offs were, Deputy Dog and all those. I lived for those cartoons and for Three Stooges and for um, uh, Bozo the Clown, who I actually appeared. My first, I've done a lot of TV work and a lot of movies, but my first time ever on TV was at a Bozo show that I attended. It was the
Hmm.
local Bozo the Clown who went nationally, and who wants to do a commercial in between. I raised my hand.
Yeah.
This little fat kid wanted to be on it, and it was for you had to drink a whole thing of Nestle's quick. And
Wow.
all these other jealous kids in the audience were screaming, he's not going to finish it. He's too young. And I was like devastated because they pulled me off it, but they saw how devastated I was. So they had me do a commercial for Ronzoni Sawabona.
Wow.
And on the way out, I remember we passing offices because to do the commercial, you had to go into another area and then come back. And I remember passing a studio that had Chuck McCann in it.
Oh yeah.
And Chuck McCann went on to be, you know, quite an actor and and a great pop culture person. And he also was a Laurel and Hardy expert. You know, he portrayed Oliver Hardy, and he was he's a great guy and so wonderful. And years later, he was in California, and I somehow found him on Facebook or whatever. And I told him about passing by, and I told him that whole story. And at the same time, I said, "Can I get a top 10 list for you for a horror book that I may put out someday?" And sure enough,
Yay.
Chuck McCann, who probably 99% of your audience has never heard of.
Well, he did a few national things. I mean, probably the most famous thing outside of New York television is probably being in TV shows like Far Out Space Nuts, which was on Saturday mornings, or he was in the Right Guard commercials where the guy opens a medicine cabinet and goes, "Hi, guy," you know. So, you know, I mean, and then he was Sonny the Cuckoo Bird on the Cocoa Buffs commercials for years.
Know this. Yeah. You know this. The great thing, what I think about some of the pop culture people in this book is the Mark Arnolds of the world will know everyone in there.
There's a few I didn't, but I'm not going to ask you about those. I figure.
I'd love to hear which ones they are. If you're not a sports guy, you may not know Dave Winfield. You know, there's so many rock stars, there's so many actors, and there's a ton of scream queens who people might not have heard of. But I don't just put their lists in, Mark, as if you noticed, I also do a little bio on them.
Mm-hmm.
And if they're not connected to the horror field, but I found a connection, like Ruth Buzzy played a witch in a movie. So I made sure I listed that.
Right.
And I think that the interest of the book is not just for horror fans, but for celebrity and pop culture fans and people who thought, whoa, I never knew who that was. Of course, I remember him from TV. Of course, I saw that guy in the movie. And when you see the photo in the book and you see the name and you see their list, it really connects and it resonates with so many people who are reading the book and loving it.
Right. The one I remember, I don't know if I have it on my notes here, but wasn't it Gary Puckett who doesn't like horror movies? And he gave a non-horror movie. Was it him or is it somebody else?
Gary Puckett gave a great list.
Who was the one that gave it anti?
John Sebastian.
Oh.
Right, from the Lemon Spoonful, Woodstock legend, John Sebastian was very reluctant to do this. He said he doesn't like him. He's not going to do it. And then the same day he said he's not going to do it, he shoots me off this great paragraph on going to see a horror movie and getting scared.
Yeah.
I thought, well, that's cool, but I'm not going to put a chapter on one paragraph. And then he comes back the next day with another paragraph. And I thought, all right, you know what? I love the guy. I'm going to put his list in because even though it's a few, the stories he told were so good, they deserve to be in the book. Now, there's a few other people who said, we don't like horror movies or we don't like scary stuff. And I say, well, I want you in the book. The best two examples of this are Sarah Karloff, Boris Karloff's daughter. Yeah. And of course, Boris, there's Boris right there. Yeah. The Frankenstein model to say hello. And there's just to make it a nice little visual. And there's another one coming up, a shrunken kick out of this silly stuff. So Boris Karloff's daughter, Sarah, said, I don't watch monster movies. I don't like horror movies. I barely saw my dad's movies, but I'm going to do a list for you. What a trooper. God bless her. She goes, I'm going to do a list for you of the things that have scared me through the years. That's her list. Brilliant. Number 10 was doing this list was her that scared her. The other one that is farthest from a horror fan was John Lennon's sister, Julia Baird. and we're dear friends. You know, I see her every summer when we go to Liverpool. She's come over to my Beatle conventions. And I said, can I please get a list for you? And she goes, let me think on it. She comes back and says, I'm sorry. I don't like horror movies. There's no way I can do this list unless you go along with what my idea is. And I said, I'm sure I will. What is it? So let me send it to you. She sends me this huge dissertation on the horror aspects in Shakespeare. Whoa! This was one of the biggest chapters in the book,
Yeah.
the most intellectual one. You know, it's like a college thesis. She did the top 10 horror aspects of Shakespeare's work. And I was like, wow, amazing. So the people who weren't horror fans, who did come through with lists, really came through with great lists.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Now you mentioned John Lennon's sister, but you actually did get a Beatle in the book.
Ooh, didn't I though? You know, it's funny because in the
It's up to you if you want to reveal who it is.
in the back, I put, there are lists from a Beatle,
Yeah.
a McCartney, a Lennon's sister, which is Julia, a Karloff, William Shatner, one of the Monkees, one of the Munsters, and then I go on, you know, five rock and roll Hall of Famers, a baseball Hall of Famer, you know, to whet the appetite of someone who's maybe just reading the back. So the Beatle we got was, of course, the drummer before Ringo, Pete Best.
Yay!
And he deserves. I mean, you know, there's a few people who I put in the book who didn't really follow the rules. Now, when I say that, I requested a list with the reasons why.
Right.
Because just 10 movie titles or 10 names of, you know, Stephen King books or 10, it's just okay. I'll take it, but the only two I let get away with that, I think, if I remember correctly, were Pete Best and Gloria Gaynor, disco queen Gloria Gaynor, because her hit is "I Will Survive," and that could be the title of every horror movie where the kids get lost in the woods.
Right.
So I thought the two of the, you know, those two did just lists without. But getting Pete Best, that was, you know, a big to do for me, because I love Pete. We've been friends for a very long time. I mean, back to the early 80s. But he you know, he's not forthcoming with that kind of thing. So to get him to do that list I was very proud. I was happy enough just to get the list without the explanations for him. Right. And he, you know, and he anchors it for Beatle fans, because him and John Lennon's sister, because there's 9 Beatle chapters, 9 lists. There's 9 monkey lists. So, I mean, being a Beatles fan, being a Monkees fan, and being a horror fan, I had to get in enough Beatle lists so that my Beatle people wouldn't say, you know, Charles, we've been waiting for a Beatles book our whole life from you. You got to, you know, if I didn't put enough Beatle content in there, I would have gotten big balls for it.
I looked through the book pretty well. I didn't read it word for word because I do want to absorb it a little bit better. But, you know, from what I saw, it's very well-rounded, for the lack of a better term. You know, it's like you kind of cover all of it. I mean, if I had a quibble, but I don't care because I don't care about sports as much, there's only really one or two sports people, I think.
Correct.
You know,
Correct.
So it's like, if that's one of your interests, I'm surprised it's a little bit low, but hey, it's okay. Yeah.
So when the book went together and when I came up with the title, you know, the book wasn't finished. And I'm thinking, all right, do I put monsters, celebrities, actors, athletes, and rock stars? It still sounds a lot better than authors, directors. So it works for the title. And there is right, like you said, one baseball Hall of Famer, Dave Winfield. And that's a huge one. And in the sequel, Bride of the book of top 10 horror lists, hopefully I'll have some more athletes. But Mark, you know, it makes sense. Who do I know? My contacts, my friends, my database are mostly rock stars, you know, people who have come to my conventions, or people, you know, who were at RockCon, which was weekend of 100 rock stars. So a lot of the people who were in there are people I knew, and that's the easiest. You call up, you call up Greg Hawkes from the Cars and, hey, how's it going? What's new?
Yeah.
You comfort and bullshit a little, and then finally say, hey, I need a favor from you, and they come through. The one who couldn't, and who was very close to, as you know, Peter Tork, and he wrote a beautiful rejection letter, but he said he doesn't like horror movies, and he probably hasn't seen more than a handful to do a justifiable list. The one who also didn't see enough monster movies, but I put his list in because it was so special, was a gentleman who we lost not too long ago, Ed Asner.
Yeah.
And he adds a little class to the book.
Yeah, he does.
When you think about some of the people in there, they're great pop culture people, but they're not of the William Shatner level, the Ed Asner level. And I'd been trying to get Ed Asner. I don't know why. It was one of those that I just got the thorn up my tuchus and said, I want to get Ed Asner. So I sent it to his publicist, nothing. Sent it to the manager, nothing. Found a home address, sent it there, nothing. Sent it to, he was on a movie set, nothing. The studio, nothing. Finally, he was on a Broadway show. And I had a messenger bring him the request so that when he was, backstage, he actually saw the list. And he wrote back, and I don't know if you saw it in there.
Yeah.
There's a postcard of him, and in his writing, he goes, "You're more of a better stalker than Scotland Yard." and he goes, "You know more about this. You come up with 10 different titles." And I think he gave me 6 or 7, whatever it was.
Yeah.
How could I not put that in?
Yeah.
Because
I think one of them was a TV episode, but it was something that was really good, if I remember.
Yeah. It's true. It's true. So I got lucky with some and really, really pursued them.
Yeah.
And others, it was just like, hey, how's it going? This is what I'm doing. Wow, I love the idea. And Elliot Easton was one of those.
Yeah. No, it's fun, the variety of people. And it is fun if, they're not quite the fan, because depending on who it is. I mean, it's just surprising to me that somebody like, say, Sarah Karloff, who grew up around a dad that was making horror films virtually his entire career, not enjoy them or not like them. And it's like, wow, it's
right.
And things like that. So if you have like Scream Queens saying that they like horror films, well, that's like a no-brainer. You're in these films all the time. I would think you would like some of them, or you're just doing it for the money and the screaming. I don't know.
Some of them gave really articulate lists. I was very pleased. The other people who are in the horror field who are still with us, one of them is Ron Chaney Jr., who's Lon Chaney Jr.'s son. And there's also Lynn Lugosi, who's Bella's granddaughter, and Bella Lugosi Jr., who's her dad and Bella's son. And I'm friends with them. And I couldn't get a list out of them. And hopefully that'll be in the sequel. But they got the book and liked the book. And I mean, how could you not? If you're related to Bella, you're in the book a lot.
Right.
A lot of people actually cite him. And here's a cool Bella Lugosi right there, the Miko doll of Bella Lugosi.
Pull the string. That's my imitation of Martin Landau doing Bela Lugosi. There we go. Pull the string. Let me ask you some questions here. One of them you just answered because I was just saying, will there be a volume 2? Well, you're talking about that quite a bit, but we'll get to that in a second. I want to jump back and just saying what made you came up with this idea in the first place. I mean, yes, you know all these people, but it's not a natural thing to say, oh, I know this person. Maybe I'll get a top 10 horror list out of them. So what was the genesis of this idea?
Right. So 2007, 2008, I'm shaky with the dates, but I was already doing the Dracula tours to Transylvania for about 10 years.
Yeah.
And I was building Fright Haven, which was Connecticut's largest indoor haunted attraction. I'm thinking I got to immerse myself more with the horror community. And this is me doing a Beatles convention without giving it any thought. I jump into things.
Yeah.
Just like writing a book. I just jump into things, but I didn't jump into writing this book. This was a long time coming, and I'll tell you why. I did an online column called National Horror Happenings. And it was for examiner.com. At the time, this was an online news thing. A friend of mine, Steve, did the Beatles examiner. There was it was an examiner for everything, and I wanted to do a horror examiner where I previewed upcoming horror movies, I reviewed them, I did tidbits, and it was really cool. So I was doing this, and it got a lot of readership. But I started on a lark. I loved David Letterman, and I loved the top 10 list that he would do. And I said, well, let me see if I can get someone to do a top 10 horror list. And I asked Kevin Clement. Kevin is the originator of the Chiller Theater Expos, the horror conventions, which are now celebrity shows in New Jersey. He's the grandfather of these events, and not an age grandfather, but in seniority, because he's the first one really after Fangoria. Fangoria was doing weekends, I guess, and Famous Monsters, but he established this was the show on the East Coast. And I said, hey, Kevin, I want your top 10 list. Oh, how am I going to do that? But he did it, and it was good. And I put it in the book. And then I thought, well, you know what? I'm going to be doing this weekend of 100 rock stars. Mark, I produced a show called Rock Con.
Right.
And it was just that, a weekend of 100 rock stars. I thought this is going to be the Comic-Con of music. This is going to be the event that every year, and I'm going to be a billionaire, blah, blah. I lost a fortune on the show because I had a ton of guests and not enough attendees, but that's to be expected. Again, I jumped into it. But I made friends with Al Jardine from the Beach Boys, Mary Wilson from the Supremes, Tommy James, Ron Dante. The list isn't endless, but is 100 people there. And before the event, I thought, well, here's how I'm going to help promote the event. I'm going to get a top 10 list from Phil Fang Volk from Paul Revere and the Raiders, from Ron Dante, from all these cool people. I'm going to print their list on my National Horror newsletter, and I'm going to say, come see this person at the RockCon. So it was all a promotional tie-in. So I'm doing these lists, and I stopped doing the National Horror Happenings newsletter because Examiner folded, and I thought, okay, that's fine. I had my joy when I was putting out Good Day Sunshine, the Beatles magazine, for almost 20 years. That was a chore. That was 80 pages every other month. And I said to myself, I'm doing 6 books a year. Mark, the joy of getting the published finished item is phenomenal, but the work and the service that goes into making this thing, nothing is worth that kind of time. And I said, I'm never going to do a book. And people will always say, when are you going to do your Beatles book, Charles? Not. When are you going to do a DJ book on all your adventures and all your hysterical stories? Not. And then during the pandemic, I'm home. I'm not DJing because there's no gigs. I'm not booking bands. The tours aren't happening because no one can travel. There's no conventions. I'm not producing anything. My juices are going crazy. I'm watching horror movies with the kids, playing tons of pinball. If the weather's nice, we're going bicycling and hiking, so I'm staying in shape. But that creative A-type personality that I have that always is looking for the next thing is just going bazooties. So the next thing becomes Connecticut's first paranormal convention, which I did the following summer. It's doing another Beatles festival. It's adding it to but it's also, I have all these lists. It won't be such a monumental task to find the lists, edit them, make sure they sound good, so that the people who gave me the lists sound as good as they should. Write the bios for each one. Get a great photo, and then also maybe do a photo or two of one of the horror movies that they might be mentioning. Well, I was about 15, 20, I don't know how many short, and I got on the horn during pandemic when everyone was home. I said, Gary Puckett, I need a list for this book. No problem. John Lennon's sister. I really, worked it. I worked it really quickly, and within a few weeks, I had 100. And I said, the convention I did, RockCon, was a weekend of 100 rock stars. I want to do 100 celebrities in this book. And I got it off to a publisher who, is known to both of us. And it kind of, I didn't realize it takes forever to publish a book. I thought, well, Good Day Sunshine, I finished the book. I had it back from the printer in a week. Fred Velez, who does Monkey Books, he self-publishes. He puts it in there. He's got it in a month. I thought I'd have it. And then last Halloween I would promote it, but there were a lot of typos. There was a lot of issues going back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. And I thought, yeah, I don't know what I could do and get this book done and out. And a friend of ours, Mike Ventrella, stepped up and said, I'll do the layout for you. And he added some graphics. He added,
Yeah.
some more posters. He juiced it up. If there was what you call orphan pages, if you're in the industry, that's, a blank page unnecessarily inside or a
Right.
half a page. And he filled it. He made it look even better. And within a month after he submitted it for me, we had the manuscript, the proof, the galleys. It was ready to go.
Mhm.
And then a few months later, finally, August of this year, we had the printed issues, and I'm going crazy. I'm doing podcasts, I'm doing interviews, doing book signings wherever we still can. COVID's not over.
Mhm.
So a lot of libraries aren't very, welcoming for in-person events, but I'm doing horror conventions and as many events as I can to get the book out there. And I'm having so much fun with it that I'm planning another book with another author named Mark Arnold. I'm doing at least one, possibly two or three, and then a sequel to this, and then a spin-off of this. So I guess there's about 4 or 5 down the pipeline, and they probably, some of them would not be happening if it wasn't for you. And I think, if I'm not mistaken, that you're actually thanked.
I'm mentioned in the book. I saw my name. It was
You are, and
it was the
it's
only color letters in the book.
it's 3D, it's color, and it says
It's in 3D.
we thank everyone.
Can you put a box around it as in bold?
It says right here, we thank everyone who helped this author put out the book, except Mark Arnold, is what
And
it
you
says.
misspelled my name too, damn it.
I did?
No.
Oh no. ASSHO. No, I spelt it right.
Oh.
No, I'm very grateful for all your input to
Thank
the
you.
book, and in all sincerity, you hooked me up with the publisher, and you were very, very, you gave your time very freely, and I thank you for that.
Yeah. Well, now that you've done it, I mean, I'll say this before I ask a couple more questions. I mean, it's like I did my own fanzine for years. It was
Right.
about Harvey Comics, but yeah, after doing it for 21 years, I said, looking back on it, I go, how did I ever have time to do it? Because I did like clockwork. It had a deadline. It's like, The cool thing about books, even though they do take longer, there's no real deadline. Nobody's really forcing you to get something. I mean, you have in your head, like in your book, you want to get it out by Halloween, but
yeah.
nobody's saying, you have to get this out for the 50th anniversary of this thing. You can, but I don't try to do that. I happened to luck out with my Chipmunks book that came out on the 100th anniversary of Ross Bagdasarian, but that was just luck, because I wasn't sure if I was going to do it. But the main thing I was going to say, it is a lot of work, but you don't have the general pressure deadline typically, so you can kind of work on it a little at a time. Like I mentioned at the top of the show, or maybe before the show, did we mention Keith Scott on the show? I don't remember, but the voice of Bullwinkle, he was on my podcast recently. He's working on another book. He did a book called The Moose That Roared, which is excellent, about the history of Rocky and Bullwinkle and all those cartoons.
Yes.
And he was asking me, and I think he's like professional celebrity and everything. He's asking me, Mark, how do you get all those books done? And I go, you just work on it a little bit every day, and you don't worry about deadlines. You just, it's like, what can I work on today? Well, I got an hour here. I'll work on my Mad book. Oh, today I have an hour here. I'll work on my Beatles book or whatever book I'm working on. It's like, and eventually it gets done. I mean, that's the main thing to do. But,
true. And Good Day Sunshine, the pressure of putting it out and getting it out on time, because I was very anal about that. I remember I would get it, because in those days we weren't as computerized. I hand addressed 5,000 envelopes every other month. I stuffed them. I had a team and friends and girlfriends and parents, whoever was helping me, stuffing them. But then I stapled them. And then there was bulk postage, and I'd get it I'd have to bring it to the post office. And I'd come home and I go, oh, great, I have 2 days to not do anything. And then 3 days later,
start again,
working on the next one. Yeah.
I don't know how you did. I still have my issues though. So And I had the Good Day Sunshines too. Before you say it, anyway. So the people you got, were you surprised who turned in lists? And in saying that, were you surprised at some of their selections of movies?
Yeah, that's a great question. Mark, I was surprised at every single one. I really, famous actress Karen Black, very respected. She was in Trilogy of Terror with that
Yeah.
crazy little doll. And I somehow found a contact for her. She gave one of the greatest lists.
Hmm.
And what I think I might have actually made a mistake early on, because in trying to get lists, I would send out a sample list, what my template was.
Mhm.
And I would send hers as an example, and I would send Eddie Deazen's as an example.
Mhm.
And for listeners who don't know, Eddie Deazen played Eugene in Grease. He was Ringo Klaus in I Want to Hold Your Hand, the voice in SpongeBob, Polar Express. Great guy,
Yep, yep.
true fan, a real big Beatles fan.
Mhm.
And his list was great, and her list was great. And I think when I sent it out, their list was so great that I might have intimidated some people who might have otherwise given me a list and added a few words, thinking that, oh my God, I have to be this brilliant and come up with clever reasons for every song. So when I did get one back, and it was someone I hadn't heard of in such a long time, I was like, whoa, how? But more crazy is, how did I find these people? I to this day don't know how I got through. And this is like, we talk about big stars who are in the book.
Yeah.
They're not such a big star. Do you remember the unknown comic from the Gong
Oh yeah,
Show?
Murray Langston.
Murray Lang. Okay, thank you. You know Murray Langston because he was on the Sonny and Cher show. You know him from a lot of places. A typical person who's not a pop culture buff and is not, into the things we are, might not know the unknown comic unless they saw the Gong Show. I don't know how I reached him, but there was a connection there in that he was roommates with Linda Blair for a while, for whatever reason. And I didn't get Linda Blair's top 10 list, but I got his. And I don't remember to this day how I got some of the ones I got at the time. But they always, you asked if any of them surprised me. They all did.
Yeah. And then one thing, at the top of the hour, I was kind of giving you my brief history on things and how I got into horror. But then as I was reading the book, I was saying, I wonder if anybody would pick this film. And when I was little, I didn't consider these horror films. But as I'm older, I could see they could be. And they're two of my favorite films of all time. One is Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory. And somebody had that on their list. And I believe somebody else had The Wizard of Oz. And it's like, they're not traditional horror movies, but they do have scary scenes.
Very
And,
scary.
in the case of The Wizard of Oz, the witch looks like a classic witch you would see in, any story about witches, Hansel and Gretel or whatever, Snow White or whatever that has witches in it. So, it's like, I guess I did like horror movies prior to that, but they had to be like controlled circumstances. They'd have to be like in the case of Willy Wonka, it's not the whole thing is a horror movie, although you could think of it that way. I mean, there's scenes that are happy and funny and stuff like that, and just very little of kids getting sucked up chocolate tubes and down egg chutes and things like that. But
definitely scary aspects of both of those movies. And I'll tell you something I haven't told anybody else. I pulled out two lists from the book that were ready to go. One was from an artist, and I'm not going to mention his name nor why I pulled it out. But the other list was a top 10 list of how The Wizard of Oz could have been even scarier.
Yeah.
You know how she meets the person who's selling the potions, who eventually is the wizard,
Right.
The things that he could have done with that little girl.
Right.
And then the three uncles who were in her bedroom all the time.
Yeah. What's wrong with that?
There's really horror aspects.
Someone was named Hunk.
So someone came up with top 10 things that made Wizard of Oz even more scary.
Yeah.
And you know what? We decided I don't want to ruin that movie for some people
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
they'll never watch it the same way. They will watch it with, oh my God, that could have been a pedophile, or oh my, you know what I mean?
Now,
So
when did you see? I want to ask you about that because everybody's seen these movies, I think. When did you first see Wizard of Oz?
I probably saw around 8 or 9,
Okay.
and I loved it, and I don't remember being scared at
Okay.
it.
Okay.
But I remember showing it to my kids and they loved it, but they were very jaded because I took
Hmm.
my son to see Drag Me to Hell when he was 3. And Machete,
Okay. Okay.
Bad Grandpa, Jackass. I mean, thank goodness that there wasn't a parent association in these theaters, because I would take them. So they were jaded. You know, when a horror jump came out, they would laugh. They would get
Wow.
hysterical. But that's the age that you could, because they also came to my haunted houses at that age. And
Yeah.
then a little later on, like 9, 10, it was a little more reluctant. They saw Mama, they saw a few horror movies, and I know that it scared them. And then they didn't want to come to they were able to act in the haunted house, but they didn't want to walk through it
Yeah.
because they didn't want people
Interesting.
jumping at them. So, you know, for me, as I've gotten older, I always say nothing scares me. And I'll walk through a haunted house if it's my own or a competitor's, and I'm to make them feel good. And nothing scares me. But as I've gotten older in age, I can't go on roller coasters.
Yeah, I went through. I mean, it's funny how I was going to say roller coasters earlier when you were talking about your experience with Bride of Frankenstein. I
Yeah.
started the same way, but with roller coasters. The first time I actually rode on a proper one, I kept my eyes shut. And then my friend, and it was a free day in junior high school where they took us because we were graduating 8th grade, and everybody loved roller coasters. I couldn't stand it, but we went to this theme park called Great America, which is still there in California, but it's virtually 90% roller coasters. So if you go there, I mean, there's nothing else to do but eat if you don't go on these things, or go on those little cars that go around in a circle, go, And so my friends were dragging me, and so the first time I went like this, and then a friend of mine said, it's scarier if you have your eyes closed. Then I go, really? And so the next time I kind of went like that, where I was kind of blink, and by the end of the day, I was going on all of them, and I was like, yeah, and then flash forward like 20 years, and it's like I was going with another friend of mine's kids on all these roller coasters at a different park, and I was starting to get queasy and sick, and I go, oh, I can't do this anymore. It's like, I guess that's what happens with age. I don't know. I don't think I'm that old, but it wasn't as fun anymore.
No, I remember my 20s. I went to like amusement parks with either girls or friends who were more scared than I was, and that's the time I was the best, because it was like I was the brave one.
Right,
So
right.
it didn't bother me. And then the scarier, the more thrilling it was, the more I enjoyed it. And somewhere I got that queasy thing. And my kids, in their teens, and they go on everything. They'll do bungee, they'll do anything, and I can't. I'm doing bumper cars now.
Yeah.
But
And I never thought that would happen,
but I'll tell you something interesting, where we tie in roller coasters and scary stuff. I would host at my haunted house. I would be the Crypt Master Chucky. People, before they came in, I'd give them the rules. I'd give them a little shtick, a little humor, a little comedy, put them in a sense of false sense of security, whatever you call it. And then they'd go in and they'd get, very scared. And then a little kid would come up, and no, we walk up to the door. They see me. I'm dressed like a maniac. They don't want to go past me. They don't want to go in. And I go on my knees and I go, look, I'm a normal guy. Do you go on rides at the amusement park? And the kid will go, because he's crying. He doesn't want to go in.
yeah.
I go, do you remember how scared you were the first time you went on a roller coaster? And then you said, Mommy, I want to go again. Well, this is like that. You're going to go through, you're going to get scared, but it's in fun, like a roller coaster. And when it's done, it's done. And you know what, the kid, and this worked with so many kids. And then one kid looks at me and goes, I'm scared and I hate roller coasters. I go, well, so much for my speech on why you can go through.
Yeah. But going back to Wizard of Oz 1 second, I just wanted to, it's my show. I can talk about me all I want. Anyway, no, I saw it at age 4 the first time on television. and we're talking like, well, I'm 54 now, so 50 years ago, 1971, and that was the same year I saw Willy Wonka in the theater. But the scene that freaked me out, which probably it was like, that freaked you out, but when it didn't, like, I didn't run from the room or anything. I was just like, whoa, that's creepy. When the house that falls on the Wicked Witch of the East, it's the two legs just sitting there outside the house, and then they take the shoes off, and then the legs curl up under the house. I was like, whoa, that's creepy, And so that was the only thing that really scared me that I remember on that film the first time I saw it. And then at the end of the film, I started crying, and my parents were like, Mark, what's wrong? Why are you crying? And I go, I'm crying because it's over.
Wow.
because I loved it. I wanted to see it again. Of course, back then you couldn't, like we said earlier. And so I was like, I'll never see it again, But anyway, I see it a zillion times then, so I don't cry anymore.
It's usually people say the flying monkeys scare them the most.
It didn't on me. I don't know. It's probably because there's a lot of monkeys on TV. No, monkeys, but also Lancelot Link was on. Monkeys or Planet of the Apes movies were being made. Monkeys didn't scare me.
I don't remember a lot of my nightmares, and I don't remember if this emanated from the monkeys in Wizard of Oz. I don't think so. I think maybe King Kong. I don't know what, or maybe going to the Bronx Zoo, because I went there a lot. I remember I'm walking down the street with my parents, or one of my parents, I don't remember, and we're closing the corner, and we're in the Bronx, whatever else, and then there's the gorilla, and it's all friendly until its arm starts stretching out around the block to get me. It's a combination of King Kong and Plastic Man. The arm just stretched around the corner, and I woke up. And I don't remember a lot of nightmares, but that's one of the ones that stayed with me, and I remember from childhood. First movie I ever saw in the theaters was Dumbo, and I wasn't scared at all. First movie I remember seeing on TV was Bride of Frankenstein, and I remember my mom taking me to a theater in the Bronx. And it was either Help or Hard Day's Night. I think it was Help. And all the girls, it was a packed theater, and it was probably a holiday, maybe it was Columbus, I don't know. Everyone was screaming. And whenever Paul would come, it was screaming. My mother stood up in her best New York Bronx. She goes, "Can you all shut up? It's a movie. Why are you making noise? We're trying to watch the movie." And now you know how I got Charlene. But why do I think of that? Why do I think of that? Because I was probably very embarrassed, and that was probably one of the scariest things of my childhood. Was that? I don't think I've told that story. So that was.
Well, now that makes me think. You mentioned movie theater movies, but you saw Bride of Frankenstein on television. What was the first movie you remember seeing in the theater that you would consider a horror movie?
I thought it was Dumbo, but what's the movie?
Dumbo's not really a horror movie. No, I don't mean the first movie ever. I just mean first horror movie.
I don't honestly remember, but I will tell you the movie that I saw in a theater that gave me nightmares.
Okay.
And I was much older. I was probably in college, so I shouldn't have been getting nightmares from movies. But for some reason, Wait Until Dark.
Huh.
Alan Arkin and Audrey Hepburn, which is not a horror movie. It's a home invasion movie. That gave me nightmares, and I had that flu-like, half asleep, half awake all night, thinking that someone was coming through the window. And it's that could bring up a whole other topic of whether that was a horror movie. You mentioned Jaws, you mentioned King Kong. Since my book came out, those are the two that people always say, are they horror movies?
Yeah.
And it's funny because King Kong, he's right there. He's on my cover. And I think
the other one, which I think is number one, if I remember in your book, don't
give it away.
Oh, well,
don't give away what's number one.
Oh,
you mean the all-time what everyone picks, and then I put
in your book? That doesn't mean it's the all-time number one. But I have to mention it. Is that okay? I won't mention it. Let's see if people can guess it. The number one that I remember in the book isn't really considered a horror movie either, is it?
No, it's
yeah.
You have to look back at what the number one is. It's the one that everyone picked, and it's the definition of a horror movie.
Okay.
The one that it's got the most votes by all my celebrities, 34. So like a third of the 100 people voted that one as number one.
But
The
you're not
one
going to say what it is.
the one after it, an Alfred Hitchcock movie. We're not going to say which one it was. That was sure it was a
Was
hard
that the
movie.
number one or is that number two?
It's number two.
Oh, so I was
Yeah.
thinking Psycho was one.
Yeah, I know.
Okay.
So
all right.
it's really funny because
But let me talk about. I wanted to talk about Psycho anyway. I wasn't really talking about whether it's the words. I don't need to preface what's in the book, but I'll just talk about random horror movies. Somebody might like them somewhere, but now,
Psycho,
do you think
Psycho.
people you brought up an interesting thing by bringing Wait Until Dark, because I mean, do you think for the average person or for yourself that movies that are kind of more psychological thrillers are scarier than just like some monster going, walking through the room, even with jump scares?
Yes, but if it's the 1930s and you're in a dark movie theater and you see Frankenstein on that screen for the first time, you're going to faint. You're going to be in shock. You're going to live with, that's going to scare you. Or Bela Lugosi or whoever, even, as silly as it is, even The Creature of the Black Lagoon, whoever it is that comes on the screen at its time, we're jaded, nothing.
I have seen some of these on the big screen. Do you have any sort of repertory movie theater that shows older movies?
Yeah. And even the normal ones have Fathom events where they'll, bring back on an anniversary. Recent movies, there've been some great ones. Malignant's out now, and that's really good. There's The Quiet Place 1 and 2. Brilliant movies. So horror is definitely. It definitely grew, but someone says I saw The Exorcist and it don't have the effect that it did. I get it. And you got every generation of movies, the things that might be the scariest, whether it's Scream or Chucky, some of it's comical in retrospect. People can sit and watch the Friday the 13th movies, and as bloody and as gory and as a slasher as they are, they're cheering, they're cheering Jason's kills. They're laughing at them.
Right.
So many movies are movies of their time. And, the question of whether Psycho was a horror movie, that's definitely, it was a horror movie because people were too afraid to go into showers for how long. With Jaws, they were too afraid to go back into the ocean and beaches for how long.
Yeah, because you mentioned Jaws, and some people don't consider that a horror movie. But in my mind, I think Jaws and Psycho are kind of peas in a pod. They work on your fears that you could have in real life. Fear of somebody attacking you while you're in a vulnerable spot. Actually, both are fear of being attacked while you're in a vulnerable spot in the water, So
Home Invasion with Wait Until Dark, in the water with Jaws, in the shower. Yes, great example. And I think some of the horror movies overdid that because for a while I was afraid to show any of my kids movies where they open that medicine chest. Because whether it's the monkey's head
when he opens the big eyeball,
or Chuck the can, no matter what you do with that medicine chest, something is going to be on that other side. And so but you were right. The more natural things and that's nothing more scarier than if it could happen in real life. Yes.
Yeah. But then we might agree also that there are, what you said, monster movies and horror movies, and yes, they can overlap, but they can also be separate. Like, you wouldn't call necessarily Psycho a monster movie unless you think Norman's mother is a monster, but it's like, and we won't go into details. If you've never seen the film, nobody will be seated after the first.
Different level of monsters. When we think monsters, we think of, Dracula, Frankenstein, Wolfman.
But we haven't even talked about it. But it was Hitchcock trying to do William Castle, and that was probably the first horror movie I remember seeing on TV. And I'll tell you, this was like in 1974, so I can't say that I never saw horror movies. I just didn't go to the movie theater to see horror movies. So my dad flipped on, and this was even in the afternoon, he flipped on Mr. Sardonicus. Have you ever seen that movie?
I saw it when it came out when I was a kid.
And that movie freaked me out for years. And I've looked at it since. It's pretty campy, pretty cheesy, but it freaked me out for years. I was like, oh my God, is what happened to him? Could that happen to me? You know, and it's like, you know, and it's like, because I was a little kid when I saw it. And it's like, I didn't know, you know, it's like, um,
As you said that, I did think of a movie that I saw in a theater that did scare me.
Yeah.
And I had seen horror movies, so it shouldn't have. And maybe because I wasn't with my parents, I was with my aunt, and I'd never seen with her, and I wasn't in that same comfort zone. I don't know. I want to say it was called The Skull or Screaming Skull,
oh yeah.
but the music
Yeah.
was so intense in that movie. The movie wasn't scary.
No, it's not, but the music is good. I remember that. Yeah.
Yeah, and the music got to me, and we had to leave the theater. And I don't think I've ever walked out on a horror movie since, but I
Now,
had to walk out on it because
now, has there been a movie in recent times that freaked you out? I mean, I have one, and I'll tell you in a second. But
yeah, for different reasons, the Human Centipede, and 1 and 2, just because of its grossness. But no, not really. What movie comes to mind for
well,
you?
this is weird because I didn't think it would, because when I saw it, I wasn't scared. It was just afterwards. I live in Oregon now, as you know, but I was living with my dad, or my parents at first, and then my mom passed away, and my dad down in California. And my dad, up until pandemic, was traveling around the world. So a lot of times I'd just be at home alone. No problem. I don't care. I'm an adult. I can take care of myself, you know. So I see the movie The Mist. And when I saw the movie, what?
Based on the Stephen King movie.
Yeah, and it came out in the last decade.
Based on his book. Very disturbing. The worst ending of a movie in history.
Yes, it is. It has a very bad ending. And that's probably one of the reasons I walked out of the theater and I'm like holding my nose, and, you know, not literally, but, you know, I just kind of went home. And then the next day at my dad's house, I'm the only one there. My dad's house is up in the mountains, so there's like nobody around. It was really thick fog. And I was kind of freaking out, you know, and I said, oh my God, I'm freaking out this stupid movie that I saw last night.
Yeah, I remember.
So that's the last time I've ever kind of got the other previous time. What was it called? Cloverfield or something, where they were doing everything in real time. That was it. It didn't really scare me as much as it kind of made me think. It gave me pause. You know, I was like, you know, it's like just because of, but it also kind of made me a little seasick because of the turkey.
Right. It was a found footage movie.
Yeah. Same thing with Blair Witch, you know, that type of thing.
Witch, which was just a brilliant, promotional campaign leading you to believe that it was a true story. You know, brilliant. It's just fun talking about these movies, and for me, I love the switch. I love the shock surprise, whether it's a movie called Sleepaway Camp from when we were a kid, from the shock ending. And if you don't know it, I'm not going to tell you what it is. You have to see it. To Sixth Sense, the most brilliant twist in history of movies.
Unfortunately, I guessed that, so I didn't enjoy that very much. Really? I did. I swear to God, and I didn't see it in the theater, and I did honestly swear to God did not know what the secret twist. I just knew there was a twist, and so we checked out the movie, and I was watching it with my dad, and it was like the first 5 minutes of the movie. I go, well, should I reveal it? I shouldn't say what it is if you haven't seen it. If you haven't seen it by now, well, I don't care. Rosebud is a sled, okay? You know, it's like, after about 5 minutes, I said, isn't Bruce Willis dead, to my dad?
Wow.
And, he goes, I guess so. And so we're watching it, and at the end they go, oh, it's the big climax. Here's the
reveal. Which you knew.
I guessed it, and it's like I don't try to play sleuth and sit there and go, I'm going to guess this twist ending, but that one I totally did, and I was like, oh my God, and everyone's like raving, this is the best movie ever. It's like, sorry, I guessed it.
And you know what? If I guessed it, and I usually guess stuff, and I'll say it to the kids, or I'll say it to my wife, and I'll say, oh, this is obvious. It's such and such. I didn't guess that. And to this day, it's in that's in my top 10 list.
Yeah. And it's not because I didn't. I mean, I respect anybody else who likes it for that, but it's like I just guessed it right away. It's like, And
A similar movie, which is just a hair below that for reveal, for twist, was a movie called The Others with Nicole Kidman. And just the fact that I'm saying that, anyone who sees it now you can't now watch it without expecting what the twist is. So it's unfortunate. So I probably shouldn't mention these type of movies, but Malignant, which just came out, hearkened me back to Sleepaway Camp, because it's got that real cool reveal at the end, which ties it all together. Just can't be enough to be fun, and scary enough to be a horror movie, but it's a cut above. I always want it to be a little different. And when I'm scrolling through Netflix, everything is, this girl, her husband leaves her and she's in the house alone and it's possessed, or the kids are going in the, into the woods. And unless there's a real, play on that where it plays off, so many of them are just so similar, and it's a little frustrating. But the ones that stand out, my gosh, it's worth it to sift through to get those.
Now, going back to your book, one thing I noticed, you didn't put your own list, I remember. Is that correct?
Well, what I did is, instead of putting my own list, which I may put in the second one, for some reason I didn't want to skew the reader to think, well, maybe his list was out before someone else's, so therefore they knew. I didn't want that.
Right, and I get that, but if you're doing a sequel, I think you should, like the very last list at the end of the book, saying, okay, now I can put my own, or something to that effect.
No. So the last list in this book is a top 10 list for me, and it's my top 10 favorite roles that I've been in horror movies and horror and shorts and stuff. So I thought, okay, I've got my top 10 list in there. It's actually, there's two. I did a top 10 list of my favorite William Shatner genre roles, because I gave him two chapters. One was his list, and because he's like a god in this whole field, science fiction and all this. Right. And I thought, well, he's going to get a second chapter, and that's my list of what I thought were his best roles: Twilight Zone, Outer, all that. But yeah, in the back of the book, if you get that far, after you read everybody else's, and there's an A through Z, the last one is Robert Zapata, who is the drummer from Cannibal and the Headhunters. Why is he in there? Well, they opened for the Beatles, but that's not on tour. That's not the reason. How could you not have Cannibal and the Headhunters? I know. Right? So after that list is my list, and it's actually my favorite film roles that I was in. And as you know, I've been in a bunch of horror shorts and indies and grade Z movies, most of which I get killed in. And like, so I
did see that, but I would like to see in the sequel book your
I will do that.
favorite.
This is Zombie Chronicles, and I get shot in the head, and there's the three scenes that get to it. Here's me with bullet holes in my neck. Wow. Here's a shot of my kids in a movie playing trick or treat. So I thought, it's my first book ever. I got to put a little of me in it. Oh yeah. And I thought by doing that, I did a nice larger intro, so that people who know me and say, oh, you're the Beatles guy, or you're the DJ, or whatever, will understand why I did a horror book. And I put that at the end because my ego wanted to see stills of me in these horror movies that no one's seen, no one heard of. They're grade Z movies, so you got to really search to find a movie called Pink Eye, where I play an escaped lunatic and then get killed with a crowbar through my neck, through my head. So I had to list those things. That was why I did that as my top 10. Somewhere in the back of my mind, I had leftover lists. Gilbert Gottfried gave me one. Ruth Pointer, the Pointer Sisters. I got a lot of cool people who gave me lists that were too late for this. So I figured, okay, I'm going to do a sequel. Yeah. I'll include all these amazing lists. Yeah. And now that I have a book, I can show people and say, look, there will be a sequel to this. Yeah. This is a great book. You will love it, and you'll be in the next one. Yeah. So it might be a little easier to get, to solicit lists.
Hey, if you got Gilbert, you should get Frank Santapadre as co-host. So he's a big horror buff too.
I'm really excited because I'm going to be on their podcast on.
Oh, very good. Yeah, you'll definitely get it then. He'll do it. He wrote for Mad and everything, so it's like.
Yeah. Gilbert's list is a great list. I didn't get comments from it, but I'll try to get that from him as well. Yeah,
Right.
Frank is the pop culture, trivia guy, and
Yep.
really
And they
excited.
might actually get you some leads for other things because they've had everybody under the
Everybody.
sun under their podcast. They've missed a few, but then now we're going to have you. But I scooped them anyway.
No, they're really, if they're having me, they're really digging the bottom of the barrel. I think they're doing it A, as a favor, out of friendship,
Yeah,
but B, because Gilbert, did a list that'll eventually be in the next book.
yeah.
And maybe if they're not listening, maybe they think it's in this book, and that's why they're bringing me on.
Yeah. Oh, Gilbert.
Gilbert
What's
does,
going on?
I
thought my list was in this book.
he does a great Bela Lugosi too. He does a
Oh, yeah.
great Dracula.
The thing that I love about that show, I have to plug their show because I don't listen to too many other podcasts because a lot of them are too similar or they have too many people just jibber jabbering about stuff. I mean, yes, we are, but it's like panels of people like discussing like topics and they don't have any clue about what they're talking about. And I hate that.
Like 8 people discussing the best Beatles album, like
Or
that?
no, not even that. No, it'd be 8 people talking about the latest Marvel movie, and it's like, it's like, hey, I'm either going to see it or I'm not. I don't need to have these 20-something people telling me whether it's good or bad or whatever, because they probably will love it. I'll probably hate it because it's a 3-hour got to go to the bathroom show, and it's like they'll be loving all these CGI special effects that I don't really care about, and it's like, oh well. But anyway, enough of that. But what was I going to say? Oh, about Gilbert. So Gilbert will do these impersonations of like really obscure people, and it's just hysterical. And he'll do the same impersonation over and over, like he'll do John MacGyver, which if you know who he is, he's always like the stuffy guy that was in like it's only money or something like that, and he was on Mr. Terrific, and he was in the Apple Dumpling Gang. He was on a Gilligan's Island episode hunting the pussycat swallowtail, which he sounded like this, but he'll do a great impersonation as well. So when you're on the show, ask him to do some impersonations. He'll love you for that.
What was the bigger hit, Mr. Terrific or Captain Nice?
Well, ratings wise, I have no idea, but I will tell you this: I've never seen an episode of Captain Nice because it aired like when I was 1 year old. I've seen every Mr. Terrific because I have a German DVD and they put them all out on it, and they're in English with German titles, not subtitles, but titles. But other than that, the show's completely in English. I mean, you could play it in German, but I had no interest. And so I've seen them all. So I'm like, oh, okay, I'd like to see Captain Nice. I've heard good things about it, but our mutual friend Jerry Beck loved that show when it came out.
I did too.
I think it was up against something really popular, if I remember correctly, or it might have been up against the other show, and canceled each other out. I don't know.
Yeah, it absolutely was. And I remember I saw one during regular run and then the other during reruns. And I think that was the case with Batman, which was, I think, on twice a week.
Yeah.
And you would miss something really. I can't remember what it was up against, but I remember a show that I watched above all, and people would laugh at me. It was a show called It's About Time.
Yeah.
With Joey Ross and maybe Fred Gwynn. I don't remember who else.
They did finally put that out. It has Imogen Coca and
Imogen Coca was in it.
Right? I was dying to see that for years because I'm a huge Gilligan's Island fan, huge Brady Bunch fan. So I love Sherwood Schwartz. I'm friends with Hope Juber, which you probably know, and who is the daughter or granddaughter? Is it the
daughter? Yep.
Yeah, of Sherwood Schwartz. And anyway, so I said, oh, It's About Time. It only lasts a season, but it's got to have that Sherwood Schwartz thing. And I'm watching the DVD and I said, well, maybe it's because I didn't see it when I was a kid, but it's like, I go, this is it, it's like, but there are some good episodes, but in general, I was just kind of like,
but it's got that theme song. It's About Time.
It's a great theme. Yeah.
Okay, Evil and the Strangers place.
Yeah.
It was worth it. It was worth it for that.
But I still love Joey Ross and I still love Imogen Coca. So I still loved it for that, but it was lacking a bit. Yes, I love him. But I love Car 54, and that's one I never saw as a kid. I saw as an adult. I have seen every episode probably about 5 times since I bought the DVD sets because it's just so effing funny.
Car 54, where are you? I remember, it was funny because I remembered the theme songs more than I remembered sometimes the shows.
Yeah.
And I'm looking through because we mentioned Cave People, and here's where the Beatles and horror collide again. We know that John Lennon becomes, Frankenstein turns into John Lennon in Yellow Submarine.
Right.
But could we consider a movie by the name of Caveman a monster movie that Ringo Starr was in? Because he was also in Son of Dracula.
Yes.
But we forget that because the only redeeming feature of that is the soundtrack, the Harry Nilsson soundtrack, because the movie is so abominable. But Caveman is a great monsterish comedy with dinosaurs and monsters in it. And there's this magazine, and it's from England, and it's called
Horror.
World of Horror.
Oh, World.
Right? And it's packed with horror stuff, but it also has an article called Ringo Starr's Monster. If you look at the cover, it actually says Ringo Starr's Monster.
When did this come out? What year is this?
When did Caveman come out? Hold on, 19.
Oh, 81 then. Okay.
Is it?
It was when Caveman came out.
Yep, 1981.
40 years ago. 40 years ago.
And exactly. And so it sure enough, Ringo's in a horror movie because he was in a monster movie that had dinosaurs. And now I can't find the page. I can't for the life. Oh, Ringo Starr's Monster. And they show it because he's got this. Can you see this creature behind him? This giant dinosaur that apparently was on his property for a while. Right?
Wow.
And had I not gotten this horror movie, I would never have known. They call it The Beauty and the Beast, as Ringo's friend, sculptress Brenda Thomas of Swansea, recently completed a gigantic Tyrannosaurus Rex. And this version of the T-Rex is a fiberglass model named Dillis, for whatever reason, that had to be transported to a 72-acre estate in Ascot, which is where John Lennon lived before Ringo.
Right.
And it's just crazy that this is in here. And you know what? I'm going to correct it because this was not during Caveman. This is pre-Caveman. He's with Maureen in the picture. So guess what? He was with dinosaurs before Caveman came out.
Wow. But it kind of explains why he eagerly did that movie. I mean, because I think Ringo, even though he didn't make too many movies, it seemed like he had to have a reason to be in the movie, even if they weren't great movies. Like you could name any of the movies as like Candy. Probably wanted to be in it because Marlon Brando's in it.
Is Bridget Bardot in that?
Yeah, I think so. No, it's somebody else. And then you go to Magic Christian. You probably wanted to jump at the chance to work with Peter Sellers.
I love Peter Sellers.
Blind Man. You probably said, "Hey, it'd be fun to do a Western." It's like that'll be a day. It's kind of autobiographical. Son of Dracula, working with Harry Nilsson. And probably huge monster fan. I mean, look at Goodnight Vienna. He has the Day the Earth Stood Still as his album cover, with his head superimposed. But so
was
Ringo has a connection that way.
Yeah. Was Ringo in Listomania?
Yeah. And that was, kind of like a sequel of sorts to Tommy, let's say. So it's like another Ken Russell weirdness. And of course, Ringo was in 200 Motels, which is very strange too, and Zappa and all that.
Yeah.
Flo and Eddie and everything. But anyway,
do a show on Ringo's film roles.
Yeah, they did the Mock Turtle in Alice in Wonderland, and he was Mr. Conductor on Shining Time Station. So it's like,
if you watch the video for Rack My Brain,
well.
You see
that's a monster movie.
And all the
and even the Cooler could be, the little short with all his little videos could be considered kind of horror-ish, maybe.
You can stretch anything and make it horror.
I don't know. but I think out of all of them, Ringo's probably the closest to doing that. I don't know. If I suppose if Lennon did more films, other than the little short things he did and the live things, maybe, it's like I always wonder if he would have done a movie career had he lived longer, just at some point. Because like look at Keith Richards, he's in those Pirates of the Caribbean, and even Paul was in one of them,
Yeah.
So
If we're doing, the 6 degrees of separation,
yeah.
I guess we can say, well, John Lennon starred in How I Won the War with Michael Crawford, who was Broadway's greatest Phantom.
Exactly. Then George, the movie you probably have seen it. I can't remember if I've seen it or not. Little Malcolm and the whatever the eunuchs, is that considered? What is?
I know. So was that a handmade film?
No, that was an Apple film. But I mean, is that? I guess it's not a horror movie. It sounds like it should be, but
I don't know.
Anyway,
a bunch of those handmade films were a crossover. Time Bandits. They had science fiction elements.
Yeah.
And then if you watch Shanghai Surprise, you realize that Madonna was very scary in that. So there's reason you can find scares and humor in everything.
Well, there is scares, like in How to Get Ahead in Advertising. If you've ever seen that, he literally gets ahead. So anyway, I don't know where we're going with all this, but
we're heading towards The Monkey's Head. We're heading towards Eraserhead, David Lynch's film. No, we're not.
The dogs are barking.
How many dogs do you have?
We got 2 dogs here. Now we're really devolving if we're talking about my dogs.
One is Cujo, and the other one is, I don't know.
Toto. That's actually an appropriate description. Cujo will bite me on occasion, and Toto kind of looks like Toto, but that's not their names at all. But anyway, where am I going on my show? I can't even reel it in.
On your sheet, yeah. What's the next question?
I don't know. I think I've asked all the questions. I mean, it said, "What made you come up with book?" Okay, here's one I didn't ask actually. Now that I'm looking at this, is there any? I mean, you mentioned a few of them, but I mean, is there anybody you tried to get and didn't, or you're still trying to get or really would try to get? I mean, it's like you might as well put the word out. Then the gods and the cosmos and everything might work in your favor. And yet, I know that guy. He can. I'll give Charles a break, and I will. Or they might be watching themselves and say, I'll contribute a list. So is there anybody out there that would be like your dream person? And it's probably tons, but I mean, who would you like to get?
The dream people would be people who are, one who's not with us anymore is Donald Pleasance.
Oh yeah.
I would have loved.
No, I mean still with us. I hate to say because you go on forever.
Yeah, because though he's, him, Christopher Lee, those were one of the ones that I would have loved. So then it would be horror genre people. It would be like Robert Englund. Mm-hmm. It would be John Carpenter. It would be Jamie Lee Curtis, who I just wrote to care of AARP magazine because they did a whole piece on her, and maybe it'll get. I try to find unique ways of getting to the people. I just, for some reason, I wrote to Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, not because he's was a great basketball player, but he is a great editorialist. He does a lot of great stuff for Hollywood Reporter, for AARP magazine. His articles are just very, very well thought and brilliant and very socially relevant. And if he ever came up with a list, I think it would be brilliant. So he's someone that I've tried to get to, but I think it would be more of those horror icons like a Jamie Lee Curtis. And I'd love to get Bette Midler, because she was in Hocus Pocus. And
right.
I'd love to get John Carpenter for what he did, and Sam Raimi. I could go. You know what? You're gonna get me going, and it'll start aggravating me because there's.
I know who you should try to get if you haven't tried.
Who's that?
Peter Jackson.
Yes.
There's your Beatle connection.
The Lord of the Rings and
King Kong and
King Kong, if that's a horror monster movie.
Yeah.
And Beatles. I should get Can you do that for me?
All right.
That's only one assignment I want you to get for me is Peter Jackson.
Well, let's get Plastic on it. I mean, he's at least closer to the guy. Plastic EP. No, but I mean, yeah, there's anybody and everybody that could probably contribute a list, and if they're big enough, you'd probably welcome it, even if it was like really bizarre. I mean, if
Right.
Stephen Urkel from Family Matters would give you a list, you'd probably
I
yes.
would love to have Stephen Urkel.
Jaleel White will give his real name. Arthur Fonzarelli.
Thank you for reminding me, because my friend is friends with Henry Winkler and I need to get his.
Okay.
I
Because
just
I think, I will give you my opinion, and I kind of said this already, but I was most impressed with the more obscure people, not obscure as fame, but obscure as you don't associate them with horror. And then they provided a list, and you go, that was what I liked about the book the best.
give me an example of that obscure person who gave a list that surprised you and pleased you.
Now you're putting me on the spot, but we mentioned him before, but Dave Winfield is a good example. It's like you don't think about a baseball player coming up with a list. You think about baseball players only thinking about baseball, but
No, I get asked that a lot, and for some reason I don't know why my go-to is always Ruth Buzzy. I don't know why.
well,
'Cause
Ruth Buzzy could be scary and laughing. She hits people with that purse. Damn it, the Dean Martin roast.
you know what, that's very interesting. Very interesting.
Now you look like the Blair Witch Project. Oh, wait a minute, Doug. Wait, come here. Wait, hold on. You got a cameo here.
Is this Toto?
This is Cujo. Okay. Whoops. Come here. Whoop, up. Wait, do it again. All right, there you go. All right, here's the Dougie. Okay.
Higher, a little higher.
Hello.
Hello.
Come here.
Oh, he can't hear me because we're on headphones. Oh, look at that.
It's actually Lulu. That's her name.
Lulu.
I'm gonna put Lulu on put the light on so we can see Lulu. Lulu, come here. Look up. Oh, she's kind of shy. Okay.
I asked Lulu for a list. I didn't get it. She was one of my guests.
Oh, Lulu the singer.
I'm just trying to do segues here for you.
Yes. I know we're getting really distracted here. It's gonna be the longest show on record because we're just kind of rambling now.
And I'm surrounded by horror things. I don't know what to pull out and show you, but
so let me ask this because Halloween is coming up, and I kind of made this kind of a Halloween show. We'll put this on before Halloween. So any big plans about what you're doing for Halloween? You said you had your haunted houses. So what are you doing this time, Rita?
So I'm not going to be at my haunted house except for one date where I'm doing a book signing.
Okay.
We have a group going to Transylvania, as we've done every Halloween except last year, and they're going to spend their time throughout the Romanian part of the country, which has the most Dracula and Vlad connections, including all the castles and all that. But I'm going to be at a horror convention, which used to be a horror convention, is now more of a celebrity show, and that's called Chiller Theater in New Jersey. So depending on when this airs, I'll probably be there. And I used to go there forever. I mean, I would go to every show, hand out my Dracula flyers, say to people, oh my God, this is great. You love monsters. You got to come on my Dracula tour to Transylvania, blah, blah, blah. I would hand out thousands of these. And I always said, man, I just wish I was in one really good horror movie where I was known so I could be a guest. And, I've been in, as you know, so many, I'll show another visual here, so many unknown, horrible monster shorts and films and all that. And,
what's your best known film, if there is one?
So my best, that's a good question. But let me just say that before I forget that it'll be a pleasure being at Chiller Theater as a guest, but in this case, a guest author as opposed to a guest actor. But that might have helped open the door to get me in there. So my most famous role is not a horror role. It was as I played the other Elton John to Patton Oswalt. We were both Elton John in HBO's Flight of the Conchords.
Oh, wow.
In season 2. Episode 7 called Prime Minister, which had Art Garfunkel in it.
Wow.
The two guys from Flight of the Conchords they have to be Simon and Garfunkel as a tribute act. So there's a look-alike Cher, there's look-alike Obama, President Obama, and then there's two Elton John's, and I wind up chasing Patton Oswalt. So I'm in that. That's probably my most famous role.
All right, I'll have to check that out. I've seen a few episodes of that show, but just not that one. So.
And had you seen it, you would not have known it's me.
Uh-oh. Okay, so maybe I know, but I don't remember that episode. I would have remembered an Elton John in it, but no,
I've been in movies. I was in a movie with Ben Stiller and Kristen Wiig, The Secret Life of Walter Mitty, as an extra. I was in ESPN's The Bronx is Burning as an extra. So I've done a lot of things where I'm an extra. The ones that I'm most proud of, which got limited theatrical release, and you could probably find on Vimeo, is a movie called The Sadist with Tom Savini, who's one of the great makeup artists of all time. He was in From Dusk to Dawn, and I play the dad in it. And if you find the trailer, mine is the first voice you hear in the trailer. So I'm really proud of that. I'm in the movie a little. I see my son off. He goes into the woods to go on a hunting trip with his uncle, and unfortunately they meet up with Tom Savini, who's the sadist. So I'm only in that short time, but I'm the first voice in the trailer, which I'm proud of. And a new movie that's just come out. And I don't know if it's one of these direct to, I don't know how it works anymore when independent films come out, but I got to see it in a theater. And it's called The Night at the Eagle Inn. And I have a very small role, but it's strong. I play a demented, I'm always either getting killed or I'm demented. I play a demented cross-dressing psychopath who apparently had some problem in this hotel that no one can get out of anymore. And I'm the one who warns the girl right off the bat that, she'll, like, in my own verbiage, I'm saying she's never going to get out of there, and that who's the pretty debutante? Me. And I'm really going so it's a very funny, over the top, and I love over the top. I'm in a new short film called The Bastard Son, where I get to play a guy who gets beat up. And did I get beat up? I mean, there's a scene where I fly against the wall. I mean, I overdid it, and I don't know if I could pull it up on my phone and show you a scene. I don't even know if I'm allowed to show scenes from it yet, because it hasn't even been edited. It's not in post-production. There's no rushes of it. But what was really fun is I get beat up. This is what I look like after I get beat up.
Wow.
Really bloodied there. And I did a number on the door. Destroyed the door. I got hit so hard that we broke the door.
Oh, that wasn't planned. Okay.
And that's a separate movie from it.
Did you get hurt?
No.
Oh, okay.
Oh, no. The blood is fake.
No, I don't mean that. I mean the door. It looked like if you actually broke the door. I mean,
no, it was a body kind of thing.
Oh, okay. It wasn't a break. Okay, never mind. I thought you fooled me there, because I thought you actually got thrown against the door and busted it up, and it wasn't a breakaway door. Yeah, acting. I've been in a horror movie too.
Come on, tell me.
I just thought about this, because see, I have an IMDb page too. I think you have one, right?
Sure do.
Or you should. But most of my stuff is doing commentaries and documentaries and things like that. That's what I've done. But a friend of mine did this film about 10, 15 years ago called The Last Nightmare. And he was shooting it. He had a vacated house. I think it was his mom's house or something like that. And so before he sold the house, it was a really brilliant idea. He made each room like a set. So he made the kitchen into a tiki bar, and he made the living room into like a mortuary, and another room like a prison cell, and all sorts of things. And I was just there just because I was a friend of his. It was just kind of fun and everything like that. And then he's kind of looking, Mark, you're kind of a sturdy guy. Would you like to, not fat, but a sturdy guy. I'm pretty big, and and he said, would you like to play an FBI agent? And I go, sure. Do I have any lines? He goes, no. And I'm like, okay. But he says, he asked a couple of the other people. He said, "Well, I need you to run after this guy, knock him down, and cuff him." And all the other extras and people that were doing FBI roles, they didn't know how to do that. It's like, and one guy tried it, it wasn't very convincing. And I go, "Well, I could do it." And he goes, "All right." So I chase after this guy, knock him down, and cuff him, and they get it all on film. It's in the final film, and that's my big scene. And
Awesome.
he goes, "Mark, how did you do that?" And I go, "Well, I've watched enough shows like Cops and America's Most Wanted. I've seen them do it. I just was imitating what I'd seen."
Nothing is better than to be in a film and not have to learn lines.
Yeah, so I was in it, and I'm not going to name names because I don't want to embarrass him or anything, but a friend of mine was supposed to be in the film with a big speaking part, but unfortunately his stuff was cut. So he was supposed to be in the film and was cut. I wasn't supposed to be in the film, and I have like this big action scene where I'm knocking some guy over and cuffing him.
Right. That's right.
So anyway, and the film, I don't know, it's on video somewhere, I don't know where it is now, but this is about 10-15 years ago. So that's my big claim to fame on a film.
Yeah, you mentioned IMDb page, and if people don't know, if you act, if you're a director, if you're in motion pictures, it's the International Movie Database.
Right.
It's an honor to be on that. My first movie credit is a movie called A Gun for Jennifer, and it's mid 80s. And it's a movie that was made in Connecticut that I auditioned for and didn't get a role in it. But yet I was credited in the movie, and I'm credited on IMDb as my first role, which makes no sense. I remember I had to get angry. And in those days, I couldn't act. I really didn't know. And I couldn't get angry. I went, It was like the worst that I did not know what I was doing. And they are, well, you have another part. Can you do a British accent? And I went right into Ringo. "Oh, of course I can do a British accent." And I was doing, the Ringo from the cartoon. And it was just so embarrassing. I said, "Thank you. Thank you. We want to use you, but I don't think we can." All right. Anyway, and I get a credit for that. And I don't know how, but I provided audio, and I'm credited on the end credits of a film. And I'm very proud of it because it was the first, before the Beatles anthology, this was the go-to film. It was called The Complete Beatles.
Yeah.
If you're a Beatles fan, that was the video Bible for many years, for a long time. And if I supplied a bunch of audio for that, one of the things I supplied was the John Lennon line of, cheap seats, clap your hands, the more expensive seats, rattle your jewelry. I had a nice, clear audio of that I supplied to them, and a bunch of other things. Yeah, so I got credit at the end. And if you sat in the theater or you watch it on your home video and you wait and wait and wait and you watch the crawls, I'm thanked in that. So that was my first film contribution, but the film that I was credited with, I was never in, which is very funny.
It's funny on the Complete Beatles. I thought you were going to say that you narrated the thing, and it's like I don't think you narrated it unless you were doing a very uncanny impersonation of. Now I can't even think of his name. What's the actor's name? He was the. What's the actor's name who narrated it? He was.
It was a proper voice.
Yes, it was. He was in. I can tell you what he's in. He was in the Three Musketeers. He was in Four Musketeers. He was in Romeo and Juliet. Michael York. Yeah, he was in Austin Powers. That's what I was thinking of. And it was like, so I was like, you weren't Michael York, were you?
I will give you my Michael York story.
All right.
And I just shared it with him because I asked him for a top 10.
Okay, I was going to say, if you don't ask him for a list now after telling this, go to it. Anyway.
I saw Logan's Run in the theater and loved it. The third act, all right, it falls apart. But what a concept, of killing people after a certain age, blah, blah. I thought this was like an amazing science fiction film. Mm-hmm. And then a week later, college radio, I don't remember, maybe I'm wrong about the timing, but I know I saw a midnight showing of Star Wars.
Yeah.
And this is where everyone tunes me out and will never have any respect for me again. I was nodding off. I thought it was so boring. And I said, oh my God, cowboys in outer space. This is going to go nowhere. And at the time, I wrote a review for my college newspaper. and they published it. And I thought, wow, this is going to be such a great review. I'm going to send it to what was called the New Haven Advocate. That was the cool, hip, newspaper that you got free in all the campuses and everything else. So I published the college paper, published it, and it got the most nastiest responses. And the other paper just totally disregarded, because I called Logan's Run a classic for the ages that will live on long after we do and will be seen as cinema perfection for many years. And this Star Wars cartoon was such a horrible joke, with the only redeeming factors were a couple of robots. And I said, but I'll go back to Lost in Space, and I prefer the robots from the. It was just the stupidest, worst thing I ever wrote in my life. And I sent a copy of it to Michael York to show him that how much I loved Logan's Run, and that I was so glad he was in it. I haven't heard from him since.
Oh. Well, if it's any consolation, probably isn't, but I own both movies. I enjoy both movies. I'll tell my Star Wars story for lack of any other reason to tell it. This is the place to do it, I guess, since we're talking about monster movies, and there's a few monsters in it.
Yeah.
I had no knowledge of it. I didn't follow pop culture really then. I mean, like, unless it was big. We mentioned Exorcist, mentioned Jaws. I mean, if there was horror movies between those or around those, I didn't really think about it one way or the other. I mean, I guess The Omen came out too. That was one. Yeah. And but when Star Wars came around, had no knowledge of it, no interest in it. It didn't mean I didn't want to see it. It just, so the story, and apparently this happened a lot of places, that Time Magazine did an article about Star Wars, and that's really what helped it take off, because then older people who weren't so knowledgeable, like my dad's age, said, maybe I should go see this. This looks like something interesting. And so my dad asked me, do you want to see this Star Wars thing? And I go, okay, because I'll see anything in the movie theater. I'll still do it to this day, even if it's a genre I can't stand. If somebody says, hey, you want to see this chick flick? Sure. If I don't have to pay, I'll go see it. I mean, maybe not during the pandemic, but it's like, but I love sitting in the movie theater. I love watching movies. I'll see awful stuff. I've only walked out on movies. Well, I've only walked out on a movie once, and it was because a friend of mine hated it so much. It was this movie called Cave Girl, not Caveman. And it's a pretty bad movie. The only other time is because I was like doing work on a newspaper, writing articles and stuff like that. And I got to see free movies at a movie festival, but sometimes I had to be called out to do interviews and stuff. So I have to leave, but otherwise I will watch a movie and sit till the very bitter end watching all the credits. So anyway, So my Star Wars story is, basically, so I went to see it and I was like, yeah. So I loved it. I was 10 years old. And then at the end, because this is just the way I am, my dad says, so what did you think of that Luke Skywalker? And I went, who? And the reason why is because I don't tend to memorize names or anything like that. It's like, who's the main star of the picture? And like, I don't know. It's just the guy flying around the ship. That's why I was noticing all this stuff coming at me. And I was going and flying around, tell me, just say, what did you think of that blonde haired kid? Oh, him. Yeah, I liked him, So anyway, but that was my first memory. I was, hooked. But now I'll pull a thing just like you did, it's like, I'll never live this down. It's like, now I don't give a crap about Star Wars. It's like, I made it through episode 9 and I said, that's it. Now everybody's talking about the Mandalorian and all the other stuff. And it's like, tired of Star Wars, it's like, but I still enjoy that first movie and the first 4, 5, and 6 now, but the Star Wars, Empire Strikes Back, and Return of the Jedi, and everything else, I'm like, whatever. Even though I've seen them.
I never saw another one after Star Wars.
Oh, really?
just to be self, just to say to the world.
Not even with your kids? I'm shocked, it seems like that's
with the re-release of the first one. Okay. And they liked it, but they weren't blown away either. Yeah. And everyone says you got to see Empire Strikes Back. It's the best of the bunch.
Well, it's my favorite, but but you have to kind of like the concept in the first place to like Empire Strikes Back. If you're not enamored with the first one, the second one's not going to help.
I think the reason we went to see it in a theater, I don't know if it was an anniversary or maybe they 3D'd it, because
they might have done that at one point.
I think it was that.
But they 3D'd Wizard of Oz, as we were talking about earlier, and other things.
We actually
Disney
went to
movies. Oh, okay.
we went to 3D Wizard of Oz in the theaters,
Oh, okay.
and I thought the quality of the film was amazing, but the 3D added nothing to it.
Yeah. Well, it wasn't designed for it. I mean, you need to watch like Three Stooges Spooks or something where they.
There's a something I think it's called 3D Frankenstein.
Yeah.
If you haven't heard of it, look it up. It's so funny. It's a funny short, and like every other scene is a 3D scene unnecessarily.
Yeah.
And I used to watch it with the kids when they were like 2 or 3, and we'd watch it in bed. And every time there was the scene, we'd like fly back to and they would get hysterical because it was so obvious. You know, Frankenstein's on top of the roof, throws down a barrel of fire. You know, there's no reason.
You're reminding me of SCTV when they used to have Dr. Tongue's house as 3D stewardess, and they go.
I'm looking it up because I really want to know the name of it.
There's somebody you should try to get. Eugene Levy. Try to get a list from him.
His eyebrows are scary.
Yeah.
I would love to get him. No, you know, I'd love to get Mel Brooks. There's so on and on and on. Yeah. How many you know, people that I would love to get, and you know, you just you can't get everyone.
Well, I might ask around too. I mean, it's like, you know, if you want like Heath Scott, like I said, the voice who did Willy, well, he'd probably contribute one if you think it would be appropriate. You know, I could ask a few people. You know.
Sure.
Yeah. That are not in the music business. You know. I have a friend of mine. I have to say this, and he usually listens to these things. So, you know, I asked him, "Have you listened to any of the recent podcasts?" Because, you know, and I won't mention his name, not to embarrass him, but he knows who it is. And I says, "Well, yeah, the recent ones, there've been a lot of music ones with this guy Charles Rosenay. I'm not that interested. And I thought you just switched over to a music podcast." And I go, "Well." I do have an interest in music, and you know, I am writing books about music, like the Monkeys books and the Turtles book, and you know, I mentioned the Turtles, you know, and I've written a Beatles book, and it's like Rosenay knows all these people, and it's like it just happened to be convenient at the time to have, you know, Gary Puckett and Bobby Rydell, and who else did we have? You know, Artie Kornfeld and Spanky and John Barbada and, you know, Dinky Dawson, all in a row like that. You know, but it's like this podcast is called Fun Ideas Podcast for a reason, so you can have that. But you know, I would love to have more comic book people. I'd love to have more movie people. I'd love to have horror movie people. You know, I'll have anybody on this show. So it's like, you know, but anyway. So it was just kind of a funny comment, you know. It's like, no, it's not all music. It just happened to be for a few episodes. So skip over those and come back to the next one. You never know who I'll have.
If you see Charles next to you, don't watch it unless it's this show, because we're talking much more horror and pop culture than anything else.
So you have to have more comic book people in your book. You better get, but I don't know who's left. You can't get Stan Lee anymore. You know? It's like you can get Jim Steranko. You can get.
I'll be seeing him.
Neil Adams. Get him. You know.
In November, and Neil.
Marv
Adams.
Wolfman. Perfect.
Two of my favorites of all time, Marv and Neil Adams, of my all-time favorites.
You should get some comic book people. Seriously, you know. So that might be a good thought. You know. Yeah, you have conventions back there that those people show up to.
I will. No, I'm gonna be with Jim Steranko end of November in Boston. So I'll ask him. See, it's really funny because I go to these conventions. I think I'm a guest. I'll be at a table. No problem getting to all these other guests. It's a problem.
Yes.
Because if they're popular and that line is long, they want to sell. They want to sign. They don't want to hear from this guy next door who wants to bother them for a list. You know, they don't want to deal with that. They'll deal with that on Monday or Tuesday when the show's over. But by then they've lost that piece of paper that I gave them to put in the pocket. So
right. Well, good luck to you on that. I hope the second book is as good or better than the first. So I guess we should wrap this up. We've been going on for 3 hours, 4 hours. This is the longest podcast ever. Seems like it. Thanks, Charles. So
the podcast that never ends. So
So give the big plug. Here's your chance. Plug away. All right.
It's probably backwards, but it's www book of top 10 horror lists. And as you can see, it's the number 10, not TEN. And if you go to that website, you can get the book on Amazon, but if you go to that website, you can request a signed copy. And most of the people, if you're going to get a book nowadays and it's not a Stephen King or, a big time publisher, it's not James Michener, you want to get it signed. And you can always get it signed from people like yourself and myself who are putting books out, either with small press companies or have quantities available to send out. I send out either same day or next day. So when people go online, they have my email, they have my phone number. They say, "Hi, Charles, how do I get a book?" Or they shoot an email, and I'll get it right out. So that's the best way, through the website. There's also a Facebook page, which is facebook.com/book of horror lists. It leaves out the top 10. So, that's the other way to get to it. And I'm sure I have an Instagram somewhere. I'm not sure how to use that, but it's up there.
Like you said, you have 30 emails, so you probably have 10 other websites that you haven't even talked about. So
No, I have 30 emails that you don't know of. I have about 48 emails.
So if that's it, as usual, Charles, it's always a pleasure being on having you on the show, even if you call me an asshole. Anyway, and,
I had to spell it, and then I realized what I was spelling, and I stopped. Far be it from
oh,
me
you're
to
so
ever
sweet.
call it. Would never, unless it's Charlene or someone, on a hello, look at you. Now you're spooking out for Halloween. Look at that. Whoa, that's a great effect. Wow.
That's just with a flashlight. Anyway, so let's wrap it up. Do you have anything for more to say, or just have everyone buy your book and see it chiller?
Buy the book. Visit me at a con. I'm going to be in Fort Wayne at the Dead Convention. I'm going to be at Horror and Paranormal Convention in Florida in January. People, if you're in New York and Connecticut, it's easy to see me because I'm doing tons of things. But if you're on Facebook with me, you'll see all the places I am. And I'm just, it's hard to get out to libraries because they're still, COVID conscious. But I'm trying to get to as many conventions as possible and sell the book and meet fans and say hello in person.
But the cool thing about your book, and I'll say this as a final thing and wrap it up, it's an evergreen book. It's because the movies they're talking about are the timeless ones. We won't go into all of them, but they're the obvious big favorites everybody loves. And then a few surprises. I'll mention some of the surprises because, like I said, Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory. But, there's something for everybody. And, what I liked is the list in the back, that lists how many people selected these films and what they selected and stuff like that. So
a shout out to Janet Davis, who was my editor and proofreader, and she did she did those indexes because those would have just driven me out of up a wall, and I don't think I could have done it as completely, as succinctly, and as professionally and completely as she did. So a shout out to her for doing all that. Again, a shout out to Mike Contrella for helping with the layout, to you for being such a great support. I don't know if I would have put out a book had you not been one of my inspirations for
moral
putting my house.
support.
Yeah, you were one of my jaw straps for this one. You were definitely you were my support. Thank you.
All right. Well, I guess that wraps it up. And I thank you for another Fun Ideas podcast. I guess I'll go on a spooky note as and thank you for watching another Fun Ideas podcast.